Good morning, everybody, and
Good morning,
good,
Kasia.
good morning, Thomas. Today, in our next video, we are having Thomas van Pelt. Uh, Now, how to explain who Thomas is, because there is so many things to say that maybe one meeting will not be enough. Thomas is a beekeeper. He is Belgian, but living in Germany. And we met accidentally exactly a year ago when we were doing isolation cages for Thomas, and we were doing the isolation cages for on their arrest project in Belgium in the University of Ghent. And this is how the whole story started. So from this project, then following isolation cages, then we figured out about Varroa program and the group, and then slowly, or not even slowly, but fast, we started to cooperate even closer with these Varroa resistance issues. We finally met in Friedrichshafen in Eurobee trade show, also with the Belgian team, and then we went to meet the Varroa resistance team in Dresden. It was supposed to be just a small meeting, just to see what it's all about, but it turned out it was a milestone in the end. So the whole flow started also in Poland, and Thomas is a great help in this. He's a member of media team in Varroa resistance, and he has his own apiary as well, and he is doing the chemical-free methods in his own apiary. So this was very short, but we will talk about these topics during our conversation, I hope. So welcome, Thomas, once again. Hello.
Hey, hi, Kasia.
Please tell more about yourself, what I forgot to tell in introducing you.
Well, that's difficult because we can end up like speaking for weeks if I start. But maybe I can explain how I came to the bees because that's a
Exactly.
nice story. Actually, like many kids, they get a dummy, to be quiet, and I
Mhm.
got a dummy which was put into honey to keep me quiet because I was a very loud kid. So
Okay.
every night I got this dummy drawn into honey and to be quiet. But one night I was very, very quiet. And my parents, they didn't believe their ears. So they went up to my room and they saw me sitting there with the honey jar in my hand and eating it like that. And the complete bed was full with honey and I was full with honey. And this little story I had to hear my complete growing up. Every day, every week, they told me, you and your honey. So I was very conscious, very aware about honey and about bees from since I was a kid. And I believe that this actually made me being beekeeper. I believe it played a big role. Um, so it took me some years before I started beekeeping, but I was always a fan of nature. So I always wanted to start beekeeping, but I was at the time living in a city, Antwerpen, which is a
Mhm.
beautiful city. But at the time, it was not a hype yet to get bees in a city. So I only started later when I moved to Germany. And now I live since 15 years in Germany and I have like 100 beehives. And yeah, in the end, I'm beekeeper because I love nature. I love to be close to nature. So
Mm.
that's it mainly. That's enough about me. Yes.
So what happened then once you started your apiary? You were learning by yourself? You had some teachers? You had classes? How did
Well, I got like every beekeeper into beekeeper's education
you...
and books and scientific papers, and I immediately understood that beekeeping is not just a hobby like many other hobbies. Because um, the thing is, from the beginning, all the other beekeepers were saying to me, Thomas, it's all about Varroa, Varroa, Varroa. All day long, they were saying Varroa is the problem. And this was like confusing me because I wanted to become beekeeper. I didn't want to become Varroa keeper. So I didn't understand. So I started immediately to get informed on alternatives on Varroa treatment, because I understood very, very fast that most of beekeepers, they lost every year, let's say, half of their colonies. And I was really disappointed because I wanted to become beekeeper. So from the beginning, I worked with formic acid in Nassenhyder dispenser, but I experimented very much with hyperthermia, and I discovered the big treasure of biotechnical methods, which were developed by Dr. Ralf Büchler, Alexander Usanov, and Martin Gabel, for example. And all of these magnificent brood break methods, they were invented in Kirchhain, and they were like developed, and they were researched how effective they are. So I thought, why is nobody using these techniques? They are there. They are researched. They're researched by scientists. Nobody was using them, and I always heard the same excuses, like it's too much work, it's too complicated, and so on. But I didn't believe so. I just started using them. So about 15 years already, I used these isolator methods with one frame. And I started using these brood break techniques, and I started to see that every year I doubled my hives. So every year, instead of losing hives, I doubled the number of hives. Meanwhile, the others were losing hives. So I thought, something's going good here. It's going well. So maybe I have to speak about it. Maybe I have to talk with these people that they should change their methods. And so in the end, maybe I can share some sheets about this. In the end, let's put it on the big screen. So do you see my PDF now?
I see.
Still?
Yeah, that's a full screen now.
Okay. So for me, the summary of this story was that all this use of chemicals is like a thinking mistake. And of course, we humans, we use chemicals every day. If we have a headache, we use the aspirin. But
Exactly.
in beehives, this doesn't work. And it's very clear. Every year, many beehives are dead. And so we had to change something. I mean, this is why I quickly started working with the brood break methods, because there's such good methods there invented by scientists, so you can really trust on them. And it's not about headache, it's about fun. And this is the big thing. We shouldn't speak about Varroa anymore. We should speak about solutions and about having fun with beekeeping. So this was my philosophy, how I grow up with bees the last 15 years. Yes, that's
And you
that's the
kept
story.
being persistent in this.
Yes,
We're not giving up.
because you have no choice. In the end, you have no choice. If you want to end up every springtime with dead beehives, well, then continue. But who wants this? I cannot understand.
So maybe you can explain a bit more how these methods work. Finally, are they causing more work than chemical? Are they more expensive? Is it true what people first think, that that will be expensive, that will cost a lot of work, that needs a lot of time? What is your perspective in this?
Well, to be honest, these methods, they're having a wrong image. Many people say it's lots of work. Well, if beekeeping is too much work, and then you have to search another hobby or another profession. The thing is, actually, they're not much work, because the only thing you need to do is two things. The first thing, you have to know that brood gets capped after 9 days. Why is that? Because the mites go inside the brood cell for their reproduction. And after being capped, after the brood cell is capped, the mite is under arrest. She cannot escape, you know. So if we know this and we can use this principle focusedly, we can catch all the mites inside brood cells. So if you understand this, you know already half of the method.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is to be able to find the queen and to put her in an isolator. It's not so complicated. You search the queen, maybe it takes half an hour, okay, but mostly you find her in minutes because you have this little sign on her back. So you catch the queen, you put her in a cage. That's all. I mean, there are many things in life which are much more complicated. If you drive a car, for example, you have to look around, you have to look in the mirror, you have to put your lights on, you have to change gears, whatever. You put music on, your telephone is ringing. For example, if you want to learn a language, it's much more complicated. But putting a queen into a cage, it's as simple as that. So all these arguments against biotechnical methods, actually, they're just excuses because it's so simple. It's very simple. And so I can share some thing about this. Yes, actually, we talk about the solutions we are using against Varroa. And in the left side, you have these chemical treatments. And on the right side, beside the red line, you have the treatments without chemicals. And actually, during 47 years, we have been in misery, in frustration, because the chemicals simply do not work like they should, because they're depending on weather. On the right side, we have methods that work very, very fine without any chemicals. And this is the big thing. They exist, so we can change already to them. And actually, in order to make it possible for resistance breeding, for becoming resistance breeding, we have to build this bridge via the biotechnical methods. So actually, between chemical treatments and the no chemical treatments, you have these biotechnical methods, and they are so great to use because they actually build this bridge. They make it possible to become a resistant breeding beekeeper. So in short, we have to change our methods, and the image of the methods is simply wrong because they're very, very simple to use. And that's it. Yes.
So this is about to convince beekeepers to change the mindset for working in a different way. Well, you are a good example. You have your apiary is 100 hives or 99 hives, if I remember, and you managed last year to be completely chemical free. I remember you were calling so excited about it.
Yes, it's actually it's a big step because if you start doing this, you cannot believe it that you suddenly you got your target, you know. You work like 10 years on it, you want to become chemical free, and suddenly you are there. And in the beginning I was really in doubt because I said, this is not possible, I just arrived here, you see. And then the next step is, yes, I did arrive there. And then suddenly you feel inside a feeling of happiness because you reached a certain goal, which is, as a beekeeper, a beautiful goal. Because actually, beekeeping is so close to nature. So why would you use chemicals? You know, many beekeepers are shouting on farmers using pesticides and so on. But many beekeepers, they use amitraz and organic acids in their beehives. That's not natural. So if you reach, after 10 years of work and experiments and trying, if you reach a certain point, it's great. What I wanted to share about this thing is, if you get there, you always think, well, how much work did it cost? How much did you have to invest time to do this? And I have to admit, for 85 hives, I had 4.5 days of work
Oh.
the last 3 years. But if you count this to 20 hives, you have only 1.5 day of work. And if you count this to 7 hives, which is like the average of the beekeepers in Europe, they all have about 7 hives, then you have only half or 1 day of work. So you see this other story. It's too much work to get chemical free. It's just an invention. It's like a criticism. But in the end, you have to see this on the scale of 365 days.
Yes, and then
So if you work,
you have a result in, and
yes,
you have a
if you have
result.
if you have 1 day of work during 1 year and you reach that your apiary is chemical free, that's not a lot of work, you see. This is what I wanted to show.
How can it be that we were all so wrong for so many years?
I don't know. I think it's habits. We are human beings. We like habits and cling on them. So it's difficult to change. It's a central point in all of this, because how do you change people? You do this by trust. If you don't get your trust, you cannot change things. And this is a central point in these experiments, what I did. I really started trusting them because I saw the science was crystal clear. So I started using these methods. And then after a few years, I saw the results. I didn't lose any hives anymore due to Varroa. So it's all about trust.
Last year, you also had the occasion to try these methods with bigger group of beekeepers. And this is how I want to switch to the topic of Under Arrest project in the University of Ghent and Honeybee Valley in Belgium. Maybe you could tell us a few words about this project.
Yes. So I was talking with Dr. Ellen Daniels from Honeybee Valley, which is a bee institute in Ghent. Ghent is a very nice city in Belgium. And then we just simply came up with this idea of doing a citizen science project based on these isolator methods. And we invented these stickers, which are put on the cover lid of this isolator. Then we created some brochures with all explanations. We did some meetings. We did some team meetings. And finally, we got a group of 40 beekeepers with about 150 hives, and they all joined. So what we did was searching a little budget to buy the isolators. We got this by Dr. Dirk de Graaf. He gave us the budget. And then we defined contact persons, people that were supporting their groups. And we also created a WhatsApp group, because WhatsApp is a very nice and easy medium to exchange about questions, about problems. And we moderated this WhatsApp group. So what happened was there was a lot of exchange between the participants. And in the end, we saw that the data were very interesting, but not clear enough. So the first year we knew we only want to make the participants to take place into this project. And in this year, in the coming year, we want to get more exact data. But the biggest result of this project was that all the participants started to trust on these methods. So this project was built on trust and on experiments and on exchanging between people. It's about dialogue. It's about working together. And this is a beautiful thing, because so far, 47 years, we were working with chemicals in beehives, and we were all there for ourselves. I have to start my Varroa treatment. What should I do this year? Last year it went wrong. What can I do this year? I don't know. But with these biotechnical methods, you can always speak to each other, because it's all about root breaks. How did you do this? What happened? What can you do if this happened? And so on and so on. So actually, this project was not an individual project for each participant, but it was more like a collective project. And this is why it became so successful. And in the meantime, other groups are following. So there are many other beekeeper associations in Belgium that are now like trying to follow or to change their structures and finances to make everybody change on these methods. I got questions from Germany that they want the same kind of project in Germany in order to create trust with beekeepers to start using these methods. So the things are moving and the trend is clearly there. Yes.
And you put a lot of effort yourself as well, because you travel back and forth and do all the trainings and workshops and convincing sessions, let's say, to the beekeepers. We see the big result and the big number of questions and inquiries about the cages basically after this. So you are able to build this trust, actually.
Yes, and actually personally, I'm not an extrovert person, so I was like, I want to talk about this, but I'm not sure how to do this. So the last 7 years, I did like 100 presentations in different countries, and I just started to get trust myself to speak in front of people, which is fun actually, because in the beginning you start explaining the methods, but then it's a bit boring. But then you see people are reacting, so you start to become interactive and you speak to the people, and then in the end you're really talking with them, and it's really like dialogue. And then you say, I'm going to stop presentations, I'm going to start with workshops. So this is what I do now. Usually I start with some theoretic introduction about these methods in order to convince them to get their trust. And then I do some little workshops on how can you organize, how can you plan, structurize all of these things. Yes.
So what's your ambition for this year in that case?
That's a good question. Actually, it's always like making choices between different targets. I'm engaged with Varroa-Resistance 2033, where I'm in the media group, but I'm also moderating the working group biotechnical methods together with Ralf Büchler. So this is the biggest project I'm doing this year, because people need this information. People need help to start using these methods, and this is what we're trying to work out. So we will be working on a new biotechnical concept. So we will not deliver the methods to the people. We will deliver a concept for a complete year, so they know exactly what to do. Then the other ambition I have, I engaged myself to a new organization, which is called Vitale which is a new resistance breeding group, together with Josef Birk and Gerard Kotek. Maybe you know them from the ZB project. And we're working on the breeding as well as on the biotechnical methods. And my role will be there to build a bridge between the two of them. So we will start to do research on the role of biotechnical methods into resistance breeding. So to make the both sides stronger. There is a lots of potential in this. Yes, that's my ambition. And besides that, I think I want to push forward. I want these methods to be used by as many as beekeepers as possible. That's my ambition. Yes, behind all of this.
That's our ambition too.
Yes, I know.
And you also help us a lot here in Poland. You were helping with the stickers, you were helping with trainings, you were actually introducing us as well to this Varroa-Resistance. So we are very grateful. I think there is still a lot of topics to cover for the next videos before we make it too long now.
It will never end. It will never end.
It looks like an interesting year ahead of us. And I'm sure we will be in touch constantly.
As we are. Yes.
Exactly. Thomas, thank you for giving us your time today. I
It's a
really
pleasure.
believe that we will still meet for another video sometime, maybe during the season. Maybe we can see some more videos or photos from the apiary, which will be very, very interesting, I'm sure, for our beekeepers too.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thanks, Thomas, a lot, and fingers crossed for
Thank you.
your ambitious plans of this year.
Thank you very much. Greetings to Poland.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye
Thomas.
bye.